it is a really interesting company and they're doing some really innovative stuff, not just on the tech side. I think one of the most interesting projects they put into place, and this ties in some of the optionality stuff I was talking about, is so they moved to essentially like having business units. So one of the big challenges the founders faced, and I think this is true in a lot of engineering departments, is everyone was going, we want more autonomy. We want to be able to make decisions ourselves. We want to like work as these like small, product or value stream teams. And the founders were kind of like, we're kind of up for that. Obviously, founders tend to be like pretty resistant to give up control of stuff. But what they found is when they tried it in the past, like subcultures and cliques formed and it caused more problems than it was worth, right? So it kind of reverted back the other way and it was like, no, essentially like, we're going to tell you what to do, you build it, like, etc. Right? And so how do you square this circle, allowing people to kind of innovate and come up with their own stuff, but also keep them mission focused and essentially focused on like delivering value to the company, making money. And this isn't a common idea. This is a common idea in other industries, but I'd never heard of this before in the tech context, which is having business units. So essentially each of those teams had that access to their own P&L, their own profit and loss. And if their product that they were working on did well, like they would get a cut of that P&L, right? So suddenly it's like, hey, it's up to you now. Like you can run this how you want, but we know you're going to be incentivized to run it.
So the engineers had profit sharing for their own product.
Essentially, exactly. The engineers, cross-functional team, engineers, designers, product managers ish. There was no real explicit product managers, but some people were more in that role than others.
Steve, I actually suggested this idea when we talked with Tanya, right? I actually was like, why don't we compensate people like this at the engineering level? And this makes total sense to me. I don't know why this isn't more common. It feels so obvious.
It's an instant prioritizer.
Well, I said it in the context of commissions, but I was like, maybe engineers should get commissions the way a sales rep, different percentage rates and everything. But, same idea, profit sharing, same idea.
Chad, then every app would have ads. Oh, you want to look at your bank statement? Here's this ad.
But then people wouldn't use the product. And so that's a delicate balance.
But this is exactly this. You've highlighted it beautifully, and I think it comes back. This is what really triggered a lot of my thinking around the optionality stuff. Because for the first time, the story I tell around this is I had an engineer who I was like managing, right, and he was always like, "So when are we hiring?" So just to give a bit of flavor, kind of profile in terms of engineers, all very young folks at Intropic, hired directly out of uni, like they're just trying to get them basically like really bright and young, and just like let them develop there, right, and so. I was at the ripe old age of whatever, like 34, like the oldest engineer there. And so suddenly, and so they were going, when are we hiring the seniors, right? When are we hiring these senior engineers to come in and, and teach us and tell us how to do it properly and stuff like that. And now one part of this is the founders didn't necessarily want to do that because they'd had experience of bringing seniors in. And as I said, there's this kind of, this is the way to do it. No, it isn't. Fight. But there was also an element I was saying, like, look, you're doing it, building this stuff, right? Sometimes it's janky, sometimes you're making stupid errors, whatever. But for me, like the definition of what, a senior versus a junior is how many times have you failed? Like that's how many, if you're playing in a sandbox and everyone's kind of, your growth may be kind of safe, but it's much narrower. So like you're doing it and you're growing way quicker than you would if you actually had a senior here. And so all this to say, this was a back and forth. When are we going to hire them? When are we going to hire them? And then he got put in charge of one of these business units, right? So suddenly he's going to have a share of that P&L. And I had a conversation with him shortly after. And I said, so now that this is going to essentially come out of your pocketbook, are you going to be hiring those senior engineers to come in and teach you? Or do you back yourself to do it? And he was like, I finally get what you were saying, right? Like, of course, he backed himself. He's like, sure, it's not perfect, but I'd rather essentially do it myself, figure it out, and reap more of the rewards and bring someone in who's to like teach me when actually I'm kind of already doing it. And so I think this model, and so it goes back to that optionality piece though, which is really forces us as engineers think essentially economically. And this is the key thing. So I go on about optionality because as you said, sometimes it's like, well, is now the time to pay down that tech debt? Is now the time to, go and tidy up those old feature flags? Or is now the time to like ship this feature? And sometimes it is time to go and tidy it up, right? I'm not saying I think that maturity to go, instead of having this battle with the business, where the business is like, we need a feature today. And we're like, no, we've got to refactor this stuff. And it's like actually forcing engineers to be in that mindset of where do I make this trade-off rather than just being stuck in it's always got to be like done the right way, I think is really valuable. And actually, I think this goes back to like how, engineers of the future with all this AI stuff, you might be able to get dev in to go off and do all this stuff. But ultimately, at some point, this stuff still costs, right? Those agents are still going to cost money. You still are going to have to make a trade-off. Like, do I run 10 agents up to this point? I want them to then scale back or then try a different approach. Like, you're going to have, like, someone is still pressing the button. Someone is still setting this in motion, right? That's kind of that creativity point. Even if it's agents upon agents upon agents, someone at some point is making a judgment call to go, I'm going to press this button and set it off. And I'm going to point it in this direction rather than that direction. There is still going to be somewhere a human making these economic trade-offs about what to build or what not to build or how to maintain it or how not to maintain. I think that's what we've always done as engineers. Now it's just going to, like, the abstraction is going to be so high that it's going to really force us to confront the fact that it's actually a lot of what we do is like an economic trade-off. And that's what we're always doing.